unlike marketplaces where we're just throwing out choices of customers to go buy some things. I think our strategy setup is really rooted into the idea of context and content. So we want to arm you. When we say you know your dog, you understand your dog, we're using AI to bring the relevant content tailored to that breed and your lifestyle, first and foremost.
Welcome to UnNatural Selection, a show about competition, innovation, and the strategies shaping tomorrow's frontiers. I'm Nick Encina. Each week, we speak with pioneers shaping the future.
What happens when the relationship between consumers and a product completely changes? Pets have gone from animals we care for to members of the family. And that shift is creating an entirely new frontier for health, science, data, and personalized care. In this episode, we explore that transformation with Amish Desai, CEO of Embark Veterinary, a leader in dog health and genetics. Ameesh brings a fascinating perspective to the conversation, having spent much of his career in consumer and retail businesses, including Victoria's Secret, Henry Bendel, and J. Jill, before moving into the rapidly evolving world of pet health. He joins us to talk about how changing human behavior, genetics, AI, and consumer expectations are reshaping the future of pet care, and what this emerging industry can teach us about innovation and competition. Let's go.
Ameesh, welcome to UnNatural Selection, man. It's been a while since we've been talking about this, so I'm excited to have you on the show.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure to, and it's been a long time, Nick.
No, but I'm looking forward to this. Is a conversation that you and I have obviously talked about off camera for a while. And so I'm eager to jump into it. Before doing so, I always start with the same signature question to give you a chance to give us a context about what drives your work. So, Amish, can you please let us know what need or impact drives your work?
My why really starts with where I come from, Nick. As an immigrant, I really came to appreciate that nothing is really sort of given, and you own it. You always have to push yourself. And so that experience really has forged inside of me that inner drive is a switch that I've never turned off. And I think as I've sort of come to sort of push more, do more, be more, I think I carried this added sort of responsibility to always give back to folks who've helped me over the years. And that is the most honest thing I know about myself. And so when I came to the pet care, this idea of companion animal space, I was struck by something that has stayed with me over the years, which is there is a vastness of capital that has inflowed, and I think the power of science in this space has been amazing. And yet the most profound sort of opportunity that I see is, I think, that is often hiding in plain sight is the idea of pet parenthood. And I know that you are a pet parent. I think you were once upon a time also like a pet parent. And so I think to me that pet parent who's awake at the 11 p.m. hour, trying to figure out, with a sick dog and trying to figure out, how do I solve some, of the last minute last evening headaches, and really searching for those answers. And what I could not let go of this idea is that pets are really part of the family today. And so I think the pet owners deserve way more than that. And I think my mission really sort of back to my immigrant days is let's build this community of pet owners where they really get to learn, they get to connect, they get to meet others. They have a voice that actually truly matters. And I think that tangible sense of belonging is really what's been the drive and the why for me. And that's what excites me every day.
That's great. And like you said, I can definitely relate to this, and I think a lot of people can as well, right? Because I think one of the interesting trends that I spoke with, I interviewed the executive director of the McKinsey Global Health Institute. She specialized in human demographic change, and one of the things that we talked about was how human demographics across all industrialized nations we're either below the replacement rate or way below. I think South Korea is at like 0.7. In fact, they're selling more dog strollers than baby strollers in South Korea at this point. And so I think the reason why I bring this up is because the need for connection for people is still there. And I think from what I've heard, it's also caused an increase in the amount of pet parents and animal adoption rates and so on. And so that probably either you're probably very familiar with that trend and maybe it plays into some of the thinking and the strategy around Embark.
Yeah, I think I'll just give you a little bit of context. And I've only been with this industry over the last 4 years. And so I came from retail consumer backgrounds. And as you know, retail, it's like the most unforgiving sort of consumer lab if you work in retail, where you really get to sort of discern what is the consumer looking for. And it's not about having just a fantastic product. It's really about that emotional connection. And so I brought that consumer sort of lens to this sort of, this idea of, pet animal sort of DNA space. But if you go back in time, about 50 years ago, I think 1 out of 4, pets were really sort of roaming free on the streets and of this country. And it was early 70s, I think roughly 35 million pets, dogs and cats were actually killed or so I think they were sort of shelters. And I think when you step back and say, oh, geez, what happened then? These dogs and cats were animals. They were not really in part of the family. And so I think what has changed over time is sort of fascinating that the idea of fleas and ticks came on board, and those sort of treatments came into the late 1800s. And then the idea of urbanization came along. We all sort of moved to smaller cities and closer quarters. And then the power of science came through. Like really the breakthrough was the veterinarian advanced science. It really sort of made having a pet more safer. And so I think that whole transition really sort of step by step has evolved and deepened the bond between pet owners and sort of, dogs and cats, of course. And then by the year, sort of, we go back about 2 decades ago, roughly, or even a decade ago, more than 2/3 of Americans really felt like, okay, now pets are part of the family. And so I think that shift has been seismic. And I think that to me is like really a complete cultural rewrite is sort of what sort of really excites me about it. And then you fast forward to that, then you had this thing called this idea of, thing called a pandemic. And what happened in that cycle of time, which was really a whole decade worth of time sort of condensed into this sort of single sort of cycle, and about 23 million households really adopted pets. And so think about just the massive transformation that sort of underwent through that just single moment. And if you think about the spending of pet as you're highlighting, it went from $90 billion to $120 billion overnight.
Wow.
And then if you really double click into it, well, who are those folks who are adopting pets? So clearly all of the millennials were like the bulk of the majority of the adopters. But a third of the Gen Zs who are adopting pets in that window of time were adopting more for their mental health. And so every decade, every era has been sort of shape-shifting this sort of logic of where does pet parenthood go. And today it's sitting at almost $150 billion market. And yes, the ownership has steadied. That has been fascinating. I mean, there are like 80, 88, 90, almost 90 million dogs. There are like 70 million cats. And so really there are 70 million households that have a pet. And so the whole idea of humanization of pet, which is what I call, where really it's become now a fabric and part of the family. Almost 20% of pet owners who have pets today might even view them as their children, like the true pet parent.
Oh, yeah.
And so I think there has been this sort of seismic evolution in my view that as I see this time has elapsed, science clearly being the glue, then you step back and say, well, where is the pet parent in this journey? And I think to me, there are these massive B2B2C players. There are massive single category players of food and strollers in Korea and whatever. But the pet parent today, in my view, is really sort of drowning with this sort of tyranny of choices and this overwhelming vastness of data pools and whatnot. And so I think to me, that is where the gap still resides, is how do we help those pet owners? Back to my logic of this 11 p.m. hour, I wake up, my dog is sick. Who do I call? Where do I go? And I think that is the gap that I think we are trying to fill in. I think, at Embark, because there's been this sort of evolution of science that I think that has been enabling the scare, but how do we sort of really empower in the palms of the pet owners to bring that happen? And so I think that advancement has been great. I think adoption has steadied. The other fascinating thing that, we only look at dogs in my business today. There's been often, at least, a few months go by and, somebody says, oh, when are you launching cats? Cats is on our radar, of course. But I think to me, I think the interesting dynamic, really, because affordability has been sort of the pain point, I think as we think about life today in America, and housing has been sort of slowing down and whatnot, that people are migrating towards cats, and cat has seen this uptick, almost to a point where the ratio of puppies to kittens is really 1-to-1 in American households. And so you step back and say, where is all this going? It's great to see the dogs ownership, but I think it comes down to lifestyle. As you were a pet owner or a dog owner too, it's a different lifestyle than having a cat. And so I think at the end of the day, this complete sort of shift, where do you play? How do you go? And there are many more trends that I can talk about. But I think when I step back and I look at this landscape of where the evolution of the adoption cycle has been, and as you were highlighting about the replacement rate on the humans, and you see across the country, you're right. I think, the folks, the younger cohorts are, deferring marriages, in some cases not having a child. And I think the idea of humanization of pet is very much real. And I think that is what sort of gives more energy to the sector, that has had just fantastic growth. So I think it's fun to be part of this industry because, when you come from a fashion background like myself and you put this to the idea of consumer, it just sort of highlights that, how do you make them the centerfold attention? Because the pet parents are the ones making decisions every step of the way. And I think that's where the business that I have the privilege of leading is really trying to instill step by step, how do we fill those gaps?
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And I actually have follow-on questions to everything we just talked about. But before doing so, can you tell us a little bit about what Embark does for people that aren't familiar with the company? Obviously, we're already kind of jumping into a very specific topic around pet health. So I think people probably get that idea already. But yeah, it'd be great for you to just tell us specifically, especially for the people that may have never heard of Embark.
So Embark was founded about a decade ago by two scientists, and veterinarians, and they traveled the globe. And to their credits, they slept on railway train stations and swabbing as many dogs as possible. And so I think what we are proud of is that Embark is a leader in the dog DNA space, and so we really enable the pet parent, to understand the dog's unique blueprint of the DNA. Along with that, we give it the breed composition, so especially if it's a mixed breed dog. About 2/3 of the American dogs are mixed breed dogs. And so it really gives you that sort of understanding. I think it starts with first knowing who your dog is. Whether it's the breed, I think the sort of like the biological markup. And so I think we start with that. We've served over 3 million dogs to date. And so we've really enabled pet owners to understand that. And I think the next click is knowing a dog, understanding a dog. And I think where the evolution of the next chapter is, that's where we started, which is who your dog is. And I think where we are pivoting today is extending that and saying, how do we create a lifetime of smarter care decisions, enabling the pet owners to do that? And so we're building this intelligence platform that helps you understand your pet, giving you more insights and that you can action on, and ultimately build this sort of idea of care, which is what do I do with all this knowledge and insights, and how do I really enjoy the companionship with my pet over the years to come. And I think that is where the evolution is. So really, it's about knowing a dog, understanding a dog, and then really about helping them, care for the dogs. And so being a market leader comes with a huge privilege. And I think the science, which is a heritage that we have, I think is the foundation bedrock of who we are. But we're extending that sphere beyond just science into this idea of, well, let's tailor it to the personalization aspect of the dog and the pet owner themselves as well.
Hmm. And so when you talk about knowing your dog, obviously you started from a genetic standpoint. Is it still very much focused on the genetics, or do you enhance that and complement it with other information? Like, what do you mean when you say know your dog?
Yeah, I think know your dog is, I think we basically look at 270 different elements of traits, behavioral health traits. So obviously there are 400 different breeds, that are out there, and so we basically can give you the breed profile. What is the highest dominant sort of breed profile of your mixed breed dog, and as you know, every breed ages differently, evolves differently, lives a different lifespan rather, and so I think really that makeup, that biological makeup, that is the first step. And I think that guides them into, well, what does understand mean? Understand then means is, what are the high likelihoods of predisposition of health risks that we can tell you. So we look at a span of things, whether it's hip dysplasia to IBDD to mast cell tumor, is really using the power of genetics to guide those customers to say, here's another click, another step beyond just the breed profile around health and wellness that we can tell you how to think about the dog and be smart about it, be more preventative about it, or more proactive about it. I think that data into insight is where I think is where our sweet spot is. And again, we are in the early days of adding more to that, because ultimately where we want to get to is this idea of really personalized care. This platform that really brings you in your palm of your hands through an app, really sort of everyday life. How do you sort of care for it?
Yeah, that makes sense. And just extrapolating from the human world of personalized or precision medicine, the one of the benefits is obviously getting to know your person or your dog better, but the practical use of that is to kind of shift the care of that individual, in this case a dog, from a reactive form of healthcare, which is like, oh, now we see a symptom, or why is my dog acting differently or walking kind of weird, to these are this is the risk stratification for that dog. These are the things we should keep an eye out for. These are the things we might be able to prevent or mitigate or monitor. And so it really shifts you from being a reactive form of taking care of your pet to a more proactive form to say, okay, this is the spectrum of possible risks. And these are the things we can do right now to try to navigate this journey in the healthiest way possible, optimizing for the health of that dog, right?
Absolutely. I think, one example comes to mind is there was a pet parent who happens to rescue, and happens to take the Embark test and uncovers that the pet has, is flagged for NAD, which is a fatal neurological, sort of condition. And the shelter had not identified anything around this lower back pain. And so I think that knowledge that we can provide to the pet owner early into the cycle has really led to making more compassionate decisions for the caring of the dog. Or in some instances, one pet parent really saw this dog in the shelter for almost 300 days. And has a dog in our product that we have a feature called a relative finder, and so we help the pet owners find siblings of your pet, relative finders of and in this instance, he runs to the shelter because he sees a sibling of the pet that he has at home that has been in the shelter for 300 plus days, and then happens to bring it home. And so I think the power of using genetics, whether it's caring, as you were saying, being more proactive, or whether really sort of giving a home to a pet. These are the such like stories we hear every day that sort of fascinates me and excites me about, oh my goodness, the joy, the joyfulness of what the pet parenthood may look like.
Mm-hmm.
And I think these stories and giving and sort of more value to these stories and carrying them forward. This is less about marketing a product. This is less about just the power of science. It's really about, I think, how many folks we hear about the stress relief they get when they have a pet, the anxiety, sort of, the evolution of anxiety, how it sort of decouples that. So I think the power of pet companionship, if we can be a part of that journey. And I think our goal is, even in the short span of about 2 years, we have now access and have affiliations with over close to 1,000 shelters. And so our goal is to go early into the cycle, connect with those pet parents, and give them and arm them with this sort of toolkit that helps them connect about saying, okay, well, I don't know what to do with a puppy. I've never had a puppy, or if I've had a puppy, it's been ages. And so, well, guess what? We can hold your hand right from the onset. We can tell you, maybe buy a kit, learn more about your DNA and your breed composition, but it doesn't start there. That's just the starting point. How do we extend beyond that? And as you know, the first set of 18 months is like the adolescence age of us becoming a teenager overnight. And if we can really be sort of that helpful hand, that guiding hand to those pet owners, and that 18-month cycle, then really they can have a wonderful sort of companionship ahead. So
Oh, yeah.
these are the stories that really sort of fascinate me.
No, it makes sense. I mean, having a dog it's definitely a sense of companionship, and that imprinting that happens in the very beginning is very strong. I've gone through it myself, and there's this symbiotic relationship where in the very that dog does look to you for survival. Yeah, you feed it, you walk it that bond is just palpable. You come home from work, and it's literally the highlight of that dog's day. And actually, it's not even fair to say. I think the highlight of that dog's day is every single moment that it spends with you, which is why it's so invigorating and so energizing. And at the same time, you that dog eventually takes on a role of protector as well, right? Then they protect the family, protect your home, they protect you from other dogs, and so there's a very true connection that happens there. And having gone through that, when a dog does get sick, it's devastating because of, like you said, a lot of times your gut tells you something's off, but it's so hard to get to the truth of it. Sometimes you can take it to the vet and they can pinpoint it. A lot of times they just don't know, or even sometimes, a lot of times actually with dogs too, they know what the problem is, but they don't know what to do about it. It's epilepsy, but we don't know what the cause is, or it's a cancer, we don't really know what to do for it. And so shedding any kind of light into that journey, I can definitely see as being something that would be not only useful, but emotionally charging for people to understand just how do I take care of this child in a better way, this child that can't speak to me.
Absolutely. I think, the other sort of trend that's emerging, and, with this whole thing of digital revolution and AI sort of transformation that's happening around us, think about the younger cohorts. They're not running off to the veterinarian. They don't have that deep disposable income. And so they're just using AI. And so I think what we are trying to figure out again and find the gap is, where do we not provide just generic information, which could be dangerous? And how do we, and we're not trying to replace the vet, but I think back to that younger cohort is they are more digitally savvy and native, as we know. And so the needs of what the pet parenthood looks like, there are many unknowns, as you're highlighting. And as you sit in these cramped spaces and you have a Great Dane, but you're sitting in a 2-bedroom condo or a flat, that's a very different lifestyle and meaning and impact, the environmental impact to that pet, as opposed to having a backyard where your dogs are running around every day and whatnot. So these elements is what we are trying to mine for every day. We not only collect data on the pet, clearly with genetics and phenotypic data and environmental and whatnot, but we also have a vast amount of data on the pet ownership. What does the lifestyle look like? And I think understanding these patterns and on a ongoing basis, I think forging that relationship, I think is what pet parents really want. If you go to any marketplaces that I won't name here, but if you type in a supplement, you'll get probably 6,000 choices on one of these major marketplaces. And so you pause and you say to yourself as a pet parent, well, which one do I get? What do I do? Which one is right? Now I can go to a veterinarian and ask him or her, but that's going to cost me time and money. So I think the idea in this day and age where attention is scarce, and time is limited and choices are too many, helping pet owners navigate that through every step of the way, I think is where I think the power of that sort of consumerism and sort of this idea of pet ownership resides.
No, I totally agree. And, one of the things that interested me about this conversation was that Embark has really been spearheading a lot of the science behind pet health and especially obviously canine health. And the data sets that you must be so deep at this point. I mean, a decade of collecting DNA from dogs of all breeds and mixtures and so on, and then joining that with phenotypic data, behavioral data, and so on. have over the years, have you seen any striking patterns that discoveries that you've seen from the data that you're like, wow, who knew? Things that listeners might be like, wow, that's really interesting what the data is telling us about dogs.
Yeah, I think there are many instances where I think if you think about the dog population today, generally in America, an average span of a dog, like average age of a dog, is sitting at about 6 to 7 years. So I think, and then the weight, the average weight, composition of the pet, sort of skewing a little bit towards heaviness. And so I think when you stop and you say to yourself, well, geez, what does that mean to you? Um, Probably I would say at least 2 out of 3 dogs that we have in our database have a higher propensity of one of the variants spiking towards some predisposed risk potential. And so you may think, oh, I just adopted a pet from the shelter and it's a young puppy and everything's going to be great. And you wait till that's 8th year or 9th year of owning the pet, and you start finding things and symptoms and illnesses, and it's probably too late to account for it. So I think there are many elements like that. We now have a feature that we can identify mast cell tumor across all breeds, all 400 breeds. So I think that alone, and I think there are many instances where, that we can highlight to these pet owners. Again, using multitude of genetic sort of imputational power to guide them. Obesity, allergies, I think is another one. We have a product, a feature where using the idea of polygenic risk scores, which is finding the sort of tiny sort of variables in your genomic sense and highlighting which ones can be highly predisposed risk on food or allergy. So allergies is one, and we're seeing a tremendous tremendous response. Not only because of allergy season right now, but just generally around. But again, if you catch it early, why is your dog itching or licking paws? Example. I think this is where the knowledge becomes immensely valuable. And then what do you do with it? Well, you either can give your dog an allergy supplement, or you can give an allergy RX drug, Apoquel and things like that. So I think that is where the evolution of this, and this can all happen within days. You don't have to wait to find those symptoms. Again, I think we are sort of pushing ourselves to leverage that data pool that we are very proud of, to constantly come up with what we're calling as a series of polygenic risk scores. Obesity, weight, even seizures. The other thing that we've uncovered that we're really sort of immensely proud of, and we literally are doing a beta test as we talk, is linking genetics to behaviors. So if you think about what's top of mind for most pet owners today, obviously the health and wellness, which is the number one concern. But right below that sits is this idea of behavior. Well, why is my dog behaving inside the house in one manner, outside the house one manner, or when they see people? And so what we've linked is we really have identified 15 sort of behavioral insights or behavior insights that are linked to genetics. And we're just sort of arming our pet owners with that sort of data insight. And again, we're not pausing right there, because I think identifying a problem is step one. But then what do you do with it? And so what we've done is attached ourselves to another partner who has this online behavior training programs. And then over 150 different classes that you can sit at your laptop and you can say, well, this is what I know what my dog's doing. Let me train and work with my pet. And then we've even gone one step beyond. And what we're trialing right now is, well, if you don't want to take an online class, more like a master class, we can even bring on a real vet and help you train your vet in the moment. And so I think the data extension is just the beginning. And I think to me, we're not just mining data for data's sake. We really want to zoom into this solutions orientation idea of giving these pet owners a variety of means to care for the pets.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I've been in the precision medicine space for a while, and when I talk to doctors, they're all for it. But one of the things that comes back very clearly is don't bring me problems without solutions. If you're going to identify risks, if you're going to identify any preconditions and so on, I need you to also provide the solutions so that we can drive towards better outcomes versus giving me more homework. So now I have to go and do my own homework to figure out what to do, or identifying things where there is no treatment or no cure or no mitigation strategy, right? So identifying, like in the human case, identifying that somebody has a 12% risk of Alzheimer's. It's like, okay, great. Now, what do I do with that, right? Both for the patient and for the doctor. And so I definitely relate to that. Um, and I think the concept of precision medicine is also really striking for dogs because they're also exposed to the elements much more than we are, right? I mean, their bare paws are on the dirt. Whatever is on there is going to get on their feet. They lick, they chew, they drink the water all over the place. They have a much more evolved olfactory system. And so, the way that maybe even pollution in the air affects their development. These are all things that obviously come into the whole concept of precision medicine, which is really looking across all health determinants and the data that's available and thinking about how do all these different determinants factor into the health of this one dog or this one person. So when we think about animals, especially dogs, it's the genetics, but then how those genetics interact with their environment, with their behavior, with socioeconomics, and all those things bundle into that furry ball of love that you call your pet.
I love it. I think, we're going with it. The last 2 years, we started something leveraging the science of DNA methylation or epigenetics, as you know that. And I think what is that? So it's really, if DNA and sort of, genomics is the actual blueprint, how is that, it helps you understand how that blueprint really is getting built around the real world. So it's the food that you eat or the activity you have or how much sleep or how much stress the dog actually has. And I think that over course of time is like that leaves a biological imprint or in a fingerprint. And so the epigenetics idea is to really capture that. So we were the first in the industry to launch a dog age test. And so if you were to, take the DNA in a sample and we give you within a sort of a 12-month, estimation sort of period, what is that calendar age of your pet? And so you may have, happen to have adopted the pet from a shelter and thinking it's a 3-year-old, dog, but in reality, the dog could be, only 18 months old or maybe 4 years old. And so I think the power of science like this, as you're highlighting, whether it's in a preventative care, whether it's in a precision medicine, through the multi-omics idea of where, genes and the idea of, sort of, genomics can be translated into proteins and metabolics and and tissue and all of that. I think that is where the natural evolution of the industry is going, and I think that's where we want to be partnering with those sort of houses to help sort of bring the care solutions forward. So I think it's one spectrum for me is we want to help you with the more the proactive more of the sort of idea of help you sort of prevent it with this polygenic risk scores and behavioral insights. But then you extend into epigenetics. And I think epigenetics I think there's a lot of human, I think back in the human space, there's a lot of sort of attention given to longevity these days. I think the same is sort of transcending into the pet sector. And there's a lot of capital infusion, a lot of innovation coming there. And the idea of whether it's a pill that is coming out shortly that is FDA approved to, again, help you treat a certain sort of gene and variant to help you sort of slow down the age. But I think we believe that I think where Embark can play a role is really help you on this sort of leverage the capital power of the scientific power of epigenetics and sort of help you understand really at an organ level, functional level, what's happening within the dog's sort of health system. And so I think there's a lot of collaboration ideas that we've been sort of ideating on because we are the front runners in this field of epigenetics. I think we can build it forward. But I think it's sort of fascinating how science, along with AI and all of that, can come together. And I believe where the industry is going is more of that. If you even if you step back, as we talked about adoption, I think as well, food and all the essentials are clearly the bread and butter for most companies in this sector. No, there's no doubt there. But if you step back the last couple of decades, Nick, what has been again very sort of fascinating is the idea of services, grooming, walking, supplements. Things like that again is just like how you do with your baby and your child. Same logic has sort of transformed, this sort of massively transformational for this industry. And that sector, those services are growing at like 2x rate. And so I think what's happening is, as we talk about deferral of marriages and whatnot, adoption has been steady, but for caring of the pet parent doesn't have the time in most cases, so they're relying for these outside services to come and care. And so I think it's sort of these trends that we are watching very intimately is also shaping where does Embark play, where can we kind of fill in those gaps, so for those pet parents. And so generally that's sort of where the headset is.
Yeah, it's interesting. As we think about technology, you mentioned AI. Obviously, every field is being affected by AI. And one thing that occurred to me as we're talking a lot about companionship with animals is I've read articles about people kind of playing with the idea right now, but is some people theorizing that in the future, a lot of people will get companionship from bots or AI agents and so on, right? And as I think about it, I'm like, okay, on the one hand, it makes sense because they can simulate or replicate human interaction. On the other hand, there's a reciprocity that comes with a pet, which is it's not just being there. You get something back from the dog in you also give into the dog, which as you give, it increases the stakes and your sense of being a part of this journey as well, that I don't think necessarily AI can replicate. And even in Fortune 500 companies and large corporations, we are starting to understand very clearly where AI can benefit in speeding up things and automating things, but it doesn't replace trust. It doesn't replace a human interaction that goes into making decisions. All those dynamics that are part of the fabric of society, it can't replicate that, at least not yet. So when you think about these trends and you think about the massive disruption of AI, I think AI is, I'm guessing, a huge factor into your innovation because what you do fundamentally, you're in the healthcare space, right? I mean, it's like in healthcare is a data space. It's all about how you use this genetic information and this phenotypic information and so on. So on that side, AI is massively useful for wrapping your hands around all this multi-omic data and trying to make sense of it. On the other hand, where do you see the technology converging with biology, and then where this might take pet health, dog health in the future, if you really think big picture?
Yeah, I think what we envision is particularly in this AI space is I think the pet parent is going to be looking for this sort of personalized sort of insights and care sort of knowledge. I think genetic information is going to be more easily available. AI can spit out, if you tell the breed and you tell the age, probably AI will give you a couple of data points. And I think where we are looking in the future is the idea of telemedicine, the idea of really taking a step back and saying, well, if I can upload my results for my vet visits, if I can take my genetic data, if I can take my other sort of multi-omic data and feed it into AI, can it spit out a personalized care plan? Then can I really walk it every day? So I think that is not far-fetched of an idea, because I think the uptake of data is there. We are actually leveraging AI tremendously across the organization for sure, but really what we call is our intelligence engine. And so I think what we're really doing is, unlike marketplaces where we're just throwing out choices of customers to go buy some things, I think our strategy setup is really rooted into the idea of context and content. So we want to arm you. When we say you know your dog, you understand your dog, we're using AI to bring the relevant content tailored to that breed and your lifestyle, first and foremost. So as you understand your dog, here's what you should understand, what it means with that sort of content. And then the second part in our sort of strategy using AI is this idea of curated commerce. So we're not in the business of just sort of offering you, sort of these products and services because it's the right thing to do and load you up with 80,000 SKUs. What we're really trying to figure out is what are the relevant SKUs, again, using AI and knowing your data and your lifestyle and giving you the recommendations at the right moment. Whether you have a triggered occasion, something happened, or you send something, giving you that information. And I think and then the power of AI, which I think we are still needing to unlock it, is I believe, and that's what really motivates me every day, is this idea of community. And so AI is no doubt very much essential part of what we do today, but we are turning on these engines every step of the way to sort of bring more context, bring more curated commerce, bring more content in a very rapid cycle. And I think the other thing we've also sort of benefited with AI is our experimentation cycles are just completely collapsed. So I think, and as you know, in the industry, I mean, all our software engineers are just QAing it every day, whatever we do. And really the cycle of concept to market, is rapidly evolving. So I think we can bring more of real-time data. Real-time data, I think, is where I think the pet owner would benefit from. I would say in the near term. Yeah.
Yeah. And speaking as a former dog owner, and then understanding what people are doing with AI, I think a killer app or feature would be if you could use AI to help translate what dogs are saying to you. We talked before about not knowing what your dog is saying, and I know that they're doing experiments and trying to figure out the sounds and communication patterns that whales and dolphins and other animals do. They're trying to use AI to see, can they find the pattern to say, like, can we translate what they're saying? And because they communicate with each other, so there's got to be a pattern. It's not random. I'm guessing dogs are the same way. So is it possible to use an AI not only to find general patterns, but then to train it on your dog specifically? So when your dog barks in one way or behaves in a different way, it can start giving you some insight into, like, specifically this dog is saying it's hungry or it's hot or be careful because there's somebody in the house.
Absolutely. I think we've already been sort of trialing what we call as computer visioning using AI, but we haven't released it commercially because we're still in the trial phase. But you could take a picture of the poop as you're walking. You can upload it, and we can tell you a lot more about that. You can take a picture of the dog, and we can tell you what the state of the dog is. I mean, there's just immense such variations of what AI can do for you. We are sitting on the largest library of dog or canine images. And so I think we are leveraging this sort of all these asset pools that we have, again, and using the AI engines to like fire it up and say, we want to arm you, but I think we have to be careful because, as you know, it's still in the early days. There's a lot of hallucination, and I think we don't want to compromise our scientific fidelity just because it's a cool thing to have AI. So I think, but you're right. I think the systems are going to get much more sophisticated very shortly. And I think this idea of you can really upload a picture or take a video of your dog. Even think about even with wearables. If you have a dog collar, most of the dog collar companies that we've seen are generally GPS centric sort of plays. But here is where I think data becomes powerful. They are tracking information for the dogs at a breed level. They know what the breed of the dog is. If it's a mixed breed, they can take the DNA test. They can get the breed composition from Embark clearly. But then as they sort of see the dog do things everyday life, the actual collar companies or whatever the actual companies are, they're tracking data. They have data at a breed level. Imagine you infuse that with our genetic data. So now you get even more richness of like a compounding value of that data pool. Second, if you think about industry or the insurance industry for pets, mainly for dogs and cats, or for dogs especially, is very underpenetrated in this country today. And I think it's seeing a nice, healthy uptick. But again, from underwriting standpoint, imagine if the data that we sit on and other things like that, we can, help these insurance companies factor that into the actuarial science and help underwrite, differently. The vastness of what that can do for underwriting and ensuring and giving, again, health and wellness coverage options to those pet owners is huge. So I think these are the frontiers where I think Embark sort of, looking to sort of partner with, leveraging the power of AI, leveraging the power of data. But it's sort of mind-boggling at the speed at which it's moving. And even our own modeling or, for example, the idea of computer visioning, in a matter of 3 months, we've like literally exponentially sort of, made it much more stronger and much more accurate. So I think it's sort of, these are the things that I see that will be, I think, as we have the app now, we are using the app to really bring more things to life there. So.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, and I agree with you. You have to stick to the science because otherwise you don't want to fall into the pseudoscience realm. And there's a lot of that on the human side. People trying to use genetics to try to figure out what your best nutritional, strategy should be, or what kind of exercises, or any number of things, which still falls in the pseudoscience space. It's not something that card-carrying scientists would necessarily do. At some point, I do believe that the science will be there. I just don't think we have enough data. And so I do applaud you for sticking to that. How have veterinarians been using this data, if at all? Is it mostly focused on the consumer side, and that's your main focus, or are people taking this information to veterinarians to try to do something with it?
Yeah, I think the journey that if you happen to get an Embark kit, and you get the results, I think most people would take it to a veterinarian today and say, "Help me understand those results." And so we are simplifying, I think, the overall digestion of what the actual results mean. But the veterinarian, and we have veterinarians in our on our team, and even they'll tell you they're not trained for guiding diet recommendations. They're not trained to tell you what supplements to take. And so if you look at the macro, if you zoom out a little bit at the industry, veterinarians, generally less and less people are signing up to be veterinarians, which is unfortunate to see. I think there has been a very significant decline over the last decade of number of people or number of visits to a veterinarian, and the cost has gone up. And so, which has been a sort of a barrier or a headwind for the industry where, not too many people are going to veterinarians. And so I think the vets have, I don't think that the genetic information, is easily sort of, for them to stamp it and help them, sort of, certify it is hard. But I think I can see where a day may come where if the pet owner takes this sort of all this information we just talked about, genetics, multiomics, and then goes to the vet and say, now help me, how do I, take this care plan that AI has generated? But veterinarians generally are seeing a little bit of pain point today. Are they going to fade away? No, I think they're still going to be the trusted advisory source. But unfortunately, the headwinds are, against them, where they are seeing a challenge. And telemedicine has come up. Televet has come up, where we at Embark can offer you a 24/7 white glove access to a vet, literally, and you can call them at any hour, at the 11 p.m. hour that I talk about often, and you can just connect with them. So you don't need to go take your dog in the back seat and rush to like a vet clinic. And I think, to me, that evolution of industry is, how do you then solve it? In that immediate moment. I think there's also a lot of consolidation happening in the veterinarian space with private equity coming together. So the industry is going through a transformation. I see that it's over time is going to get some kind of dilution there, and I think the idea of televet will take off more and more. I think we're seeing that sort of trade-off happening over time. But I think what I see is this idea where you were going, which was the idea of multiomics and epigenetics. I think those are the two things that I see tremendously, and all the knowledge from the human side is quickly, rapidly evolving into this space.
Yeah, no, it's definitely the area that excites me on the human health front, and so I can only imagine on the dog health front, and so much of, from, again, personal experience, when my dogs got sick, the medicines that we would subject them to were kind of off-label usage from human medications as well, right? And so I definitely see that trend going in that direction. Now, the pattern that we've been talking about when it comes to this growth and adoption of animals, and this is starting to really focus on the pet health and pet wellness, are we talking mainly U.S., or is this like a global trend that you're seeing, or is it in certain parts, like more Western versus Eastern? Is there a pattern to that, or do you see it globally?
I think it's fairly globally. I think, as you were highlighting South Korea, I think you're absolutely spot on that I think pets are essentially replacing babies and humans. But I think these patterns are more global for sure. Just to pick India as a country as an example, I was home, visiting my mother, and I go for an early morning walk. and I saw more dog walkers, walking probably 8 or 9 dogs. And I think every time I go there, I see more and more of that. And so the adoption, the lifestyle, I think the need for food and healthy food and fresh food, the idea of services. I mean, these are global patterns that we are seeing. And I think it's exciting in a way. Australia is very heavy. France, as we know, a little bit more skewed to feline. But again, all these countries are very much sort of seeing it, including Japan as well. So I think, we are obviously a US-centric, company. But I think when I look at the global landscape, is phenomenal how that rate of companionship is evolving quickly for the pets. And I think what it tells you is that because we're all mammals, humans and pets, even from a scientific research standpoint, some of the big pharmaceutical houses will often tap into us for any type of a clinical trial. And so we're using, again, data in multitude of sort of ways to harness and bring, whether it's impacting us as humans or impacting pets as well. But the global sort of phenomenon on pet care is just sort of exciting as well, and sort of gives you that bullishness. There is a belief that by 2030, this will be a close to $200 billion market just in US alone.
Wow.
And so that just gives you an idea that it was almost 90 billion during COVID. And so just what the exponential growth expectations are alone gives you an idea what the upside is if you're part of it.
That's incredible. And well, Amish, as we're wrapping up here, you've been obviously a part of so many different industries, and on the consumer side, on the commercial side, on the retail side, and now on the pet health, I would call precision medicine fronts. So if you could somehow project forward, fast forward into a place in the future, and I know you're nowhere close to being done. So this is like things that you've accomplished, but things that you are trying to accomplish still. But if you could project forward 5, 10, whatever many years in the future, where you could sit down and reflect back on your body of work, and think about the best case scenario, what would sense of accomplishment, what do you think you would have accomplished that would give you the deepest sense of fulfillment and pride as you would look back?
I think there are two things that really sort of, if I were to look back, and obviously there's a lot of work that is unfinished for me. But if I were to fast forward, I think the idea of compounding of the human potential is what excites me. So I think the first and foremost is being in the leadership role that you get to, work with so many smart folks every day, is finding people who you've uncovered has more of a potential, believing in them early in the cycle, and then seeing them nurture and grow and do well. And so if I look back and saying, I love to be able to see that people that who wouldn't have thought for themselves that have actually done well over the years. So that is something that I look forward to. But back to the pet, the pet parenthood, I love to have a community that if I look back and over, call it 5 years from now or 10 years from now, that we've stood up this community of pet owners that truly have found a place where they can hang out. This is not a social media website that I'm envisioning, but a place where intelligence is shared. The voice is heard. They learn from each other. They can talk about, they can meet, and they can connect. Because I think with this AI revolution that we see, as one thing is obviously becoming more and more common, this yearning for human connection and not feeling isolated, I think is going to become more evidently needed. And so I think this sort of community, if Embark can sort of build and stand up and give a place and a home to these pet owners, and really if they can enjoy a longer life and longer joyfulness with these companions, I think that's the place that would make me very happy.
I definitely can identify with that, and it hits personally because I've gone through that cycle many times. But with that, Amish, it's been such a pleasure. We've been building up to this for a while. It definitely did not let down. Thank you so much for being on UnNatural Selection, and I look forward to continuing this conversation over a whiskey or something.
Thank you for having me, Nick. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
That was Amish Desai. And now, UnNatural Signals.
The following were key signals from our conversation with Ameesh. Number 1, fitness comes from connecting across boundaries. The next competitive advantage may not come from owning the best data set, technology, or product. It comes from connecting information that previously lived in separate silos. genetics with behavior, environment, lifestyle, wearables, insurance, and care. The value emerges at the intersections. Number 2, data doesn't create advantage until it changes the decision. Embark's evolution is essentially know, understand, act, and then care. Accumulating information isn't the innovation, turning it into a better decision is. Number 3, when choice becomes infinite, context becomes a product. A marketplace can give consumers thousands of options. That doesn't necessarily make their lives better. Competitive advantage shifts toward understanding the individual and curating what matters for them at that moment. And number 4, AI is compressing the rate of organizational evolution. Amish's observation that experimentation cycles have completely collapsed is bigger than an AI productivity story. Faster experimentation means faster feedback, faster adaptation, and potentially a widening gap between organizations that can learn rapidly and those locked into slower cycles. Thank you, and see you next time.
Thanks for listening to UnNatural Selection. If you enjoyed the episode, subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone shaping the future. Explore more at unnaturalselection.net and connect with us on LinkedIn and Facebook. Until next time, keep evolving.